The morning light filtered through the cafe windows in that particular way it does in autumn, casting everything in shades of amber and gold. Sarah Mitchell stood at the counter, her young daughter Emma perched on her hip, both of them studying the menu board with the kind of concentration that comes from treating a simple outing as something special. Sarah was 32, though the tiredness around her eyes might have added a few years. Her light brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore a comfortable tan apron dress over a soft blue shirt, the uniform of someone who'd learned to find beauty in simplicity. Emma, just 4 years old, had her mother's gentle features and that particular brightness in her eyes that children have when they still believe the world is full of magic. They didn't come to cafes often. Money was always tight since Emma's father had left 2 years ago, disappearing like morning fog and leaving nothing but silence behind. But today was Emma's birthday, and Sarah had promised her something special. Even if special meant hot chocolate and a muffin shared at a small table by the window. "Can I have the one with the marshmallows, Mommy?" Emma whispered, her small hand clutching her mother's shoulder. "Of course, sweetheart," Sarah said softly, kissing her daughter's forehead. "It's your special day." As they waited for their order, Sarah noticed him. It was hard not to. He stood near the window, tall and well-dressed in a dark blue blazer over a brown sweater, the kind of man who carried himself with quiet confidence. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and even from across the room she could see the expensive watch on his wrist. He looked out of place in this modest neighborhood cafe, like a page torn from a different book entirely. His name was Michael Harrison, though Sarah didn't know that yet. At 38, he'd built a technology company from nothing, turning late nights and determination into something most people would call success. But lately, success felt hollow. The penthouse apartment was silent. The awards on his wall gathered dust, and the engagement ring he'd bought 3 months ago still sat in its box. After his fiancée decided she loved his bank account more than she'd ever loved him. He came to this cafe sometimes, in this quiet neighborhood far from his office, because here nobody knew his name or expected anything from him. Here, he could just be another person buying coffee. Emma had been watching him, Sarah realized. Her daughter had gone very still, her eyes wide and fixed on the man by the window. Then, in that clear, carrying voice that only children possess, Emma spoke. "Mom, that's the man from my dream." The words seemed to hang in the air. Several people turned to look. Sarah felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment, but Emma wasn't finished. She was pointing now, her small finger aimed directly at Michael Harrison. "That's him, Mommy. The one I told you about." Sarah remembered. For the past week, Emma had been talking about a dream she'd had, about a man who played with her in a big house with lots of windows. A man who'd held her hand and called her sweetheart and made her feel safe. Sarah had assumed it was Emma's way of processing the absence of her father, a child's imagination filling the empty space in their lives. But now Michael Harrison was walking toward them and Sarah couldn't move. He had frozen the moment Emma spoke, his expression shifting through surprise, confusion, and something else, something that looked almost like recognition. "I'm so sorry," Sarah began, her voice catching. "She's just a child. She didn't mean to." But Michael was kneeling down now, bringing himself to Emma's eye level. His expression was gentle, wondering. "Hello there," he said softly. "What's your name?" "Emma," her daughter replied, completely unafraid. "I'm 4 today." 4 years old, Michael said, and Sarah saw his eyes glisten slightly. "That's a very important birthday. Happy birthday, Emma." "Thank you," Emma said solemnly. Then she turned to Sarah. "See, Mommy? I told you he was real." What Sarah didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Michael Harrison had been having dreams too. Strange, vivid dreams that had started a month ago. Dreams of a little girl with bright eyes and a pink dress calling him Daddy, tugging at his hand. Dreams that left him waking up with an ache in his chest, grieving for something he'd never had. He'd mentioned it once to his therapist, who'd suggested it was his subconscious telling him what he wanted from life. But standing here now, looking at this child who'd somehow recognized him, Michael wondered if there wasn't something else at work. Something he didn't have words for. "Would you Michael started, then stopped, looking up at Sarah. "I know this is unusual, but would you let me buy you both something? To celebrate her birthday?" Sarah hesitated. Every maternal instinct told her to be cautious, to protect her daughter from strangers, no matter how well-dressed or seemingly kind. But there was something in his eyes, a loneliness she recognized, a gentleness that seemed genuine. "Please, Mommy," Emma whispered. "He's nice." "I know he is." And so Sarah found herself nodding, found herself sitting at a corner table with this stranger while Emma chattered away, completely comfortable as if she'd known him for years rather than minutes. Michael listened with a focus that Sarah hadn't seen in anyone for a long time, asking questions, laughing at Emma's stories, present in a way that felt rare and precious. They talked for over an hour. Michael learned that Sarah worked 2 jobs, one as a bakery assistant in the mornings, another as a bookkeeper for a small business in the evenings. That Emma spent her days at a neighborhood daycare run by Mrs. Chen, who charged what Sarah could afford and not a penny more. That life was hard, but they had each other, and somehow that was enough. Sarah learned that Michael had grown up poor, raised by a single mother who'd worked herself to exhaustion to give him opportunities. That he'd built his company thinking success would fill the emptiness inside him, only to discover that money couldn't buy the things that mattered. That he'd forgotten somewhere along the way what it felt like to simply sit with someone and be present, without agendas or expectations. "I had a daughter once," Michael said quietly, when Emma had climbed down to look at the pastries in the display case. Or almost did. "My girlfriend when I was 23, she was pregnant. We were going to keep the baby. But then—" He paused, and Sarah saw the old grief cross his face. "She miscarried at 20 weeks. A little girl. We'd already picked out the name. Emma!" Sarah's hand moved to her mouth. "Oh, Michael. I think about her sometimes," he continued. Who she would have been. What she would have looked like. "And lately?" He gestured vaguely, as if trying to capture something ineffable. "Maybe grief does strange things to us. Maybe our minds create what we need to survive." But when Emma came back, climbing into his lap as naturally as if she'd done it 1,000 times before, Michael didn't look like a man caught in a grief-induced delusion. He looked like someone who'd found something he'd been searching for without knowing he was looking. They exchanged phone numbers before parting. Sarah told herself it was just kindness, just a lonely man and a fatherless child finding brief comfort in an unexpected connection. But over the weeks that followed, as Michael began showing up at the cafe on Saturday mornings, as he started joining them for trips to the park and then for simple dinners at their modest apartment, she began to understand it was something more. Michael wasn't trying to buy their affection with his wealth. He didn't swoop in like some fairy tale prince to rescue them. Instead, he learned how to be present in their lives. He sat on the floor and played dolls with Emma. He showed up when Sarah's car broke down, not with a new car, but with a ride to work and the name of an honest mechanic. He was patient and gentle and real. 6 months later, when Michael asked Sarah to marry him, not with the expensive ring that still sat in his drawer, but with his grandmother's simple gold band, he knelt down and asked Emma first. "I'd like to be your dad, if that's okay with you," he said softly. "Not because I'm trying to replace anyone, but because I love you and your mom very much." Emma threw her arms around his neck. "I already told you," she said matter-of-factly. "You're the man from my dream. Sometimes life works in mysterious ways. Sometimes the universe conspires to bring people together in moments that feel like magic, but are really just love recognizing itself. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to stay open to kindness, to connection, to the possibility that maybe you're not meant to walk through this world alone, sometimes dreams do come true. They were married that autumn, with the morning light filtering through the windows just like it had that first day, casting everything in shades of amber and gold.